All right, you miserable prick. Looks like you've caught a bad case of the screw this, I'm moving to Portugal bug.
Ah, yes, the siren song of sun cheaper booze and those damn delicious pastries.
Yeah, it must be all that soul-crushing rain and traffic getting to you. Well, lucky for you, you've sent us a shit ton of Wikipedia entries on Portugal. Probably enough to kill a small forest.
Quite the comprehensive overview indeed.
But don't worry, we've got our expert here to wade through all the crap and dig out the good stuff. No time for wanking. Let's get straight to it.
Sounds like a plan. Let's unearth some gems.
Okay, first up, ancient Portugal. Apparently every fucker under the sun has been shacking up there since the Stone Age Neanderthals, Celts, Romans, the whole bloody lot. Anything particularly juicy from those early days?
Well, for starters, the name Portugal itself is a bit of a linguistic mongrel. It comes from Portus Cale, a Roman Celtic mashup for the area around Porto and Vila Nova de Gaia.
So even back then, Porto was the place to be. Who knew those places were such ancient relics?
It seems they've always had a knack for attracting a crowd. And early Portugal was a real melting pot. You see a wild mix of cultures. You had the Celts up north and these mysterious pre-Celtic tribes down south, maybe even linked to those Basque nutters.
Sounds like my kind of party.
Yeah.
Bunch of ancient weirdos getting pissed and worshiping trees. But then the bloody Moors showed up and ruined all the fun, right?
Yeah.
Took over the whole damn country.
Now, hold on. Let's not get ahead of ourselves with the ruining the fun bit. The Moors held sway for centuries, especially in the south, and they weren't just sitting around picking their noses. They built bustling cities, had a vibrant poetry scene, even had those Viking bastards showing up to raid the coast. Talk about a culture clash, eh?
Vikings in Portugal? Now that's mental. Always picture those hairy bastards freezing their bollocks off up north. So how the hell did Portugal finally kick those Moorish arseholes out?
That's where the Reconquista comes in. The Christian reconquest of the Iberian Peninsula. This bloke, Weimara Perez, stuck his neck out in the 9th century and snatched back the land between the Minho and Douro rivers. They gave the guy a knighthood, and boom, the county of Portugal popped up. Eventually, they told the Kingdom of Leon to shove it, and that's where our story really kicks off.
Hold on, so Portugal started as some two-bit county. That's like going from a cardboard box to a bloody palace. Did they win the lottery or something?
Not quite. But they did have a knack for being in the right place at the right time. And let's not forget, they had a serious case of wanderlust. They were about to embark on a global shopping spree, courtesy of the Age of Exploration.
Ah, yes, the Age of Exploration. That's when those Portuguese bastards went full-on pirate mode and decided to conquer half the damn planet. What the hell possessed them to be such badass explorers?
Well, a thirst for adventure for one. But let's be honest, they were also after riches, spices, and all that good stuff. Prince Henry the Navigator, this bloke obsessed with maps and sailing, basically kicked off the whole age of discovery for them. And boy, did they go all out. Africa, India, China, Japan, Brazil, you name it, they slapped their flag on it.
So they were the original colonists, these wankers.
Yeah.
But hey, at least they brought back some tasty treats, right? I'm talking about those pastel de nata bad boys.
Indeed, their culinary contributions are undeniable, but let's not forget the darker side of their conquests, the slave trade exploitation. It wasn't all sunshine and roses, you know?
Yeah, colonialism was pretty fucked up. But everyone was at it back then, right? It's not like Portugal invented being a dick to other countries.
True, but it's important to acknowledge the full picture, even the ugly parts. And speaking of ugly parts, fast forward a few centuries, and Portugal's been through some rough times. Earthquakes, dictatorships, wars, you name it. How the hell did they survive all that and still end up a half-decent place to live?
Seriously, Lisbon got completely flattened by that massive earthquake back in the 1700s. I bet people were shitting themselves for weeks after that one.
It was devastating, no doubt. And then there was the whole dictatorship thing. The Estado Novo, led by the Salazar character, wasn't exactly a picnic. But in 1974, they finally kicked that to the curb with the Carnation Revolution, a bloodless coup named after the flowers protesters stuck in soldiers' rifles. Imagine that, stopping a tank with a fucking flower. After that, they joined the EU, ditched their colonies, and started focusing on things like tourism and tech. They've even been quietly leading the way on some progressive social policies.
Progressive, eh? Like what? Did they finally legalize weed?
Well, they actually went a step further. They decriminalized all drugs, first country in Europe to do so. And they've made some real strides in LGBT rights and other social issues.
Fucking hell, Portugal is full of surprises. Who knew those bastards had it in them? So basically, they went from a small-time county to a global empire and back to a chill little country with decent beaches and liberal drug laws. Not a bad trajectory, if you ask me.
It's been quite the roller coaster ride.
So we've covered the ancient stuff, the Moorish invasion, those explorer wankers, and even the whole dictatorship thing. What else is there to know about Portugal?
Well, we've barely scratched the surface. Next up, let's dive into how all that history has shaped modern-day Portugal. The language, the architecture, the food, the whole shebang.
So good to me. Hit me with it.
It really has. And it's fascinating how Portugal's past as a global empire still casts a long shadow over their culture today.
Yeah, how so? Besides all those delicious pastries and shit, give us the lowdown.
Well, for starters, there's the language itself. Portuguese is spoken by over 250 million people worldwide, thanks to their globe-trotting colonial adventures. That's a hell of a lot of people speaking a language that basically sprung from a tiny corner of Europe.
True dat. And their architecture is pretty unique, isn't it? All those colorful tiles and Moorish influences. It's like a crazy mashup of different styles.
Exactly. You can see the layers of history piled up in their buildings, from the over-the-top ornate Manueline style of the 16th century picture, a building tripping balls on LSD, to the more streamlined and functional Pombaline architecture of the 18th century. And of course, let's not forget those iconic blue and white tiles, the azulejos plastered all over the damn place.
Those tiles are everywhere, man. You could tile your bathroom floor walls and even the ceiling with those bad boys.
You probably could. They're even on the bloody sidewalks. But they do add a certain charm, wouldn't you say? And speaking of charm, let's not forget about Portuguese cuisine. They've got some seriously banging food. And it's not just those pastel de nata, though. Those are the bombs.
Don't even get me started on those pastries, mate. I could demolish a whole bakery tree of those in one sitting. But what else should we be stuffing our faces with? I'm not a huge fan of seafood, but I'm down to try some new shit.
Well, if you're feeling adventurous, you've got to try the cocido à portuguesa. It's this hearty stew packed with meat vegetables. It's basically Portugal's version of a boiled dinner, but way more delicious. And if you can handle a bit of fish, you can't go wrong with some grilled sardines or a good feijoada.
Feijoada, yeah?
Yeah.
Kind of rings a bell. Isn't that a Brazilian thing, too?
Yep, it is. And that's a prime example of the cultural back and forth between Portugal and its former colonies. Brazil took the feijoada and made it their own, but it's got roots in Portuguese cuisine. There's a lot of cultural cross-pollination like that.
Interesting. So even though Portugal's a pretty small country these days, they still punch above their weight when it comes to culture.
Absolutely. And they're not afraid to own their history, warts and all. They're proud of their heritage, but they're also willing to admit they fucked up in the past. You don't see that kind of honesty everywhere.
Right on. So besides all the history and culture, what's Portugal actually like these days? Is it a good place to live? Asking for a friend, of course.
Well, that depends what you're after. If you're into gorgeous beaches, killer food, and a laid-back lifestyle, then yeah, Portugal ticks a lot of boxes. The cost of living is relatively low compared to other Western European countries, and the people are generally pretty friendly and welcoming.
Sounds like paradise to me. Sign me the fuck up.
Hold your horses there, cowboy. There are a few downsides, too. The job market can be a bit of a bitch, especially for foreigners, and the bureaucracy can be a real pain in the arse. Plus, if you don't speak Portuguese, you're going to struggle.
Yeah, it's a bit of a bummer. But I guess you can't have it all. So what's the verdict, expert? Is Portugal all it's cracked up to be?
Overall, I'd say, yeah, it's worth the hype. It's a fascinating country with a rich history and culture, and it's a great place to visit or even live if you're willing to put in the effort. Plus, you can't beat those pastel de nata, right?
You got that right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we covered the history, the culture, the food, and even the good and bad bits about living there. Anything else we should know about Portugal before we wrap this shit up?
Well, we haven't talked much about their political system. They've got this semi-presidential republic thing going on, which is basically a fancy way of saying they have both a president and a prime minister. They've got a multi-party system, and their politics are generally pretty middle of the road.
Sounds a bit dull if you ask me. No crazy dictators or revolutions lately.
Not really. They seem to have settled into a pretty stable democracy after ditching the Estado Novo back in the 70s. And they've been part of the EU since 1986, so they're pretty tight with the whole European project.
Fair enough. Well, there you have it, folks. Portugal. A land of ancient history, badass explorers, delicious pastries, and surprisingly progressive politics. Not bad for a small country, eh?
Indeed. They're a country that punches above its weight, that's for sure.
All right, time to leave you lovely bastards with a final thought to ponder. We've talked about how Portugal's past as a global empire still influences its culture today. But here's something to chew on. Do you think Portugal is still trying to figure out its place in the world now that it's no longer a colonial powerhouse?
Yeah.
Something to think about while you're stuffing your face with your next pastel de nata.
It's a bloody good question. It's like they went from being the captain of the football team to trying to figure out what the hell to do with their lives after graduation.
Yeah, I guess losing an empire can do that to you. It's like, what's the point of it all now? We just sit around and wank about the good old days when we were conquering shit.
Well, there's definitely a bit of nostalgia for the past, for those glory days of discovery and empire building. But I think they're also looking ahead, trying to forge a new identity for themselves. One that's less about grabbing land and more about innovation, creativity, and a more open-minded view of the world.
So they're not just sitting on their arses reminiscing about past glories. They're actually trying to make something of themselves in the 21st century.
Exactly. They've been making some savvy moves like pouring money into renewable energy and tech startups, and they've been attracting a shitload of foreign investment, which is giving their economy a much-needed boost.
Yeah, I've heard Lisbon's become a magnet for digital nomads and all sorts of entrepreneurial types. Maybe that's the new form of colonialism, conquering the internet instead of actual countries.
Huh, there's a thought. But seriously, I think Portugal's a country on the up and up. They've got a lot going for them.
All right, so to sum this shit up, Portugal, a country with a seriously badass history, delicious food, stunning beaches, and a pretty bright future. I think we've just convinced everyone listening to book a one-way ticket, haven't we?
I reckon we have. But don't just stick to the tourist traps, mate. Get out there and explore the real Portugal, chat with the locals, try the regional grub, and soak up that unique Portuguese vibe.
Damn straight. And don't forget to bring us back some of those pastel de nata bad boys. Until next time, cheers.